And I'm going to say welcome to this workshop, Advanced HTML CSS Design. I am Bart Everson, Creative Generalist for Faculty Development. I wanted to apologize for the title through no fault of Jay. I believe that was just a generic handle that he put in there. And I thought I would come up with something more creative, something more exciting, something that might actually catch people's interest. And I never did. So I don't know what I should have called it. Maybe Smiling and Styling would have been a good, no, not, that would have not been so good apparently. Okay, so of course, we want to remind you we are on Twitter at ZulaCat. You can always use the hashtag to talk about anything in this workshop, certainly. And I wanted to let you know that after this workshop, you're going to learn some things. You will be able to recognize the basic elements in the syntax of cascading style sheets. See, you've learned something already. That's what CSS stands for, cascading style sheets. You can find CSS info. You'll be able to find that CSS info in an HTML document. You'll be able to edit CSS code. You'll be able to write your own CSS code. However, of course, I should note that probably in the future, you'll mostly be copying and pasting. You know, you're probably not going to write code from scratch unless you've had a lot of practice. It is more likely, even for people who have had a lot of practice, that you just end up copying and pasting. Knowing what to copy and where to paste it is kind of a lot of the game. And yes, there is a wiki, catwiki.zula.edu. I like to put pages in support of our workshops on the wiki. So at some point in the future, there will be a page in support of this workshop on the wiki. Okay, so enough preliminaries. I wanted to tell you first of all about what we might call the Great Divorce. This is not a C.S. Lewis novel. It is, in fact, referring to a development in web authoring, web design, that came about really, I think, with the implementation of HTML4. And I hinted at that in our last workshops on HTML. And I meant to mention, by the way, another problem with the title, Advanced. This is really not going to be that advanced, right? This is going to be pretty basic stuff that I'm going to talk about here. Okay. So I might need to do some resizing. Let me see. Divorce. This is my little graphic that I'm going to present for the Great Divorce. And this is also going to serve as a little review. Let's see if I can get this going. Bear with me for a moment. Okay. Hopefully you can see my splendid animation there. The divorce between HTML and CSS. Two jobs that were really handled all by HTML got kind of split off. So HTML, this is going back to 1999 or so. HTML would handle structure and CSS would handle presentation. In other words, the HTML would tell you what something is. It would define the elements of a web page, whereas the CSS would tell you how it should look or sound if you're using an audio browser, basically how it should be presented. And of course, HTML has the pointy brackets and the slash, right? The distinctive punctuation of CSS are the curly brackets and the semicolon, as we'll see. And these have kind of become iconic of the two languages, and you'll see them sometimes used as almost like symbols for these languages. So now you know what they mean. Where is this CSS stuff, right? It actually can be in three different places: external, internal, or what we're going to call inline, which is like another form of being internal. And I'm going to show you each of these in turn. So to begin with, an external style sheet. Cascade, remember CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. An external style sheet would actually be a separate document from the HTML. So you'd have two documents, an HTML document and your style sheet, and they'd just be linked. The HTML would have a little pointer saying, I'm using that style sheet over there. And this is pretty handy because, let me give you an example of what that code actually looks like. Here is a snippet of code that you might see in a style sheet. And you see it says H1, as we remember from HTML, that's an HTML element. And then it has some rules that would be applied to H1, to the first level heading. And as you might, I'm going to get into those rules and how they're structured and the syntax of all of that in a little bit. For right now, that's just gives you a flavor of what it looks like. So what I wanted to say, though, is that the power of this approach can be seen when you have more than one HTML document. If you have multiple HTML documents, let's say you've got a whole website with many web pages, you might want them all to look kind of the same, to have a similar presentation. And therefore, you can have one style sheet to rule them all. And all the HTML documents can just link to the same style sheet. That's just for instance. There's lots of other ways that this can play out. All right, another place that styles can live is what we call an internal style sheet. And as the graphic is supposed to reflect there, it's like it's embedded right in the HTML. And so that would look pretty much the same as what we saw before, same style rules, but encapsulated, since it's inside the HTML, it has to be wrapped in our container model that we remember so well from our HTML lessons. We see the opening style tag and the closing style tag, and all the HTML rules, all the style rules are in between those style tags. If you hear a little noise in the background, that's because somebody has decided to use the printer. Okay, sorry about that. Now, one more place that style information can live in what we call inline style rules. Now, these are the simplest to implement. They end up being the least powerful for that reason. They go right in the tag, in an HTML tag. So that would look like this. Yeah, well, here is a standard HTML, no style information. It's a first level heading, the H1 tag. Really big deal is the content, and it's wrapped in those H1 tags. That designates that element as a first level heading. There's no style information though, so we don't really know how it's going to look. Most browsers would probably make that in a bigger font and bold, but there's no telling. But we can govern that with the addition of style information, and we can put it right in the tag itself. We can just remember that most tags can be expanded to include attributes. So we can add the style attribute and say style equals, and then have a style rule in there. And in this case, the style rule is going to say make the font twice as big as whatever the baseline might be. All right, so that's just a for instance. I think that's all I have to say here. Yes. So let me get back to my slideshow. Someone's printing again. Okay. All right, that's my wife. You're going to see her in the background. Right. So I want to walk you through the basic syntax of CSS. Like HTML, it's pretty simple and pretty easy. And here's the basic syntax. It's you have a selector, and then after that, in curly brackets, you have a declaration. Now let's make that more specific. The declaration would take the form of a property value pair with a colon. And yeah, don't have to, if you only have one rule inside of those brackets, you don't have to have a semicolon. But it's probably a good idea to put a semicolon. Anyway, remember we said semicolons were kind of emblematic, the semicolons and the curly braces. So it's probably good to put a semicolon at the end of each one, just to get in the habit of that at all times. So this is still kind of generic. These aren't real. This isn't a real style rule. It just gives you the syntax. Here's a real style rule. And look how easy and simple it is. Because it's so simple, it's easy to comprehend. It's the selector is P. That's our paragraph tag, right? The basic building block of text, the paragraph. And the HTML, that's referring to the HTML element of the paragraph. And then the declaration is between those curly braces, and it's a very simple rule. Color, colon, red. You notice there's no semicolon at the end because there's only one rule, so we can get away with that. It's about as simple as can be. This would make as you might imagine, this would make the text of your paragraphs red. If this was in an external style sheet, every linked document would have red paragraphs. And I see a hand up.
Yeah, yes, I have a question. Okay, so if there's only one style thing, you don't need the semicolon because the semicolon would be separating it from other command, whatever. But
yes,
semicolon go inside the curly bracket or outside the curly bracket?
Inside, because and we'll see in a moment that when you have multiple rules that apply to the same selector, they're all going to go in the same brackets.
Right. Okay, got it.
So here we go. Here's that syntax. So here's a selector with 3 rules. Now, you don't have to put them on separate lines like this. That's just for ease of reading for the human. The machine doesn't care. And you'll see that there's a semicolon at the end of each rule, the end of each declaration. Property value pairs, property value pairs. That's, again, just to show you the syntax. And we can get a little bit more specific by adding the idea of classes. There's quite a few things that I'm going to be leaving out, but I did want to mention classes. You could say selector.class, and that's going to give you more flexibility. It would look like this, for example. P.warning. Excuse me. That means paragraphs that have the class of warning. So not all your paragraphs will be red, only certain paragraphs, only paragraphs in a certain class. And you're saying, wait a second, hold on, Bart. What's this about classes? Well, class is just another attribute. Remember, most HTML elements can be expanded to include different attributes. And one of the most powerful ones, but it only has meaning in the context of style sheets, usually, is to add a class. You can pretty much make up your own classes and designate that a paragraph is going to be in this class or that class by using the class attribute. So if you designated a certain paragraph somewhere in your documents as being in this class of this warning class, then you could target that with a style rule that would not turn all your paragraphs red, only the paragraphs that you have marked as warnings. And so here's an example of that. There's the HTML that actually makes that happen. You see, it's your standard paragraph tag, and the content is important caveats for the reader. Standard HTML paragraph tag, opening P, closing P tag. We've expanded it to include that attribute, the class attribute, which is set to a value of warning. Now that warning, by the way, is not a predefined, that's not a predefined thing in HTML. I made that up. I could have called it anything else, right? I could have called it Bart's silly style or whatever. Bart's silly class, I guess, might have been a better one. Anyway, it could be called anything. It could be called warning X. It could be called, it's arbitrary, is my point. Okay. And if you want to You could even leave off the P at the beginning as the selector and just say dot warning. That would mean that anything that's in the warning class would be made red. It could be a list, right? It could be a list item. It could be a block quotation or any of these elements in HTML. Virtually any HTML element you could turn red by making it in this warning class. Putting it all together, for example, here's 3 style selectors. We have the body tag, the div tag, and a P tag. It's a little hard to read because it's all run together. Like I said, the machine doesn't care, but I will show it to you with more carriage returns, makes it easier to read. Now, I did still accidentally leave 2 rules there on the under body. That should really be on a separate line. I guess I can just change that right now. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So what we see here, just to walk you through it, it's saying that the body of the document should have a black background and it should have some padding around the edge of 10 pixels, a padding of 10 pixels. You see how there's a lot of vocabulary that you would need to learn to actually know how to address all these different style rules, but don't worry about that. The next is a div tag. Now remember, div is just a generic HTML element, just stands for division. It's literally the most generic HTML you can have for a block element. Very powerful because you can do anything with them. You can make it whatever you want. This is a div tag with the class narrow, and it's going to have a background color that's tan. It's going to have a certain font size, so smaller than our baseline. It's going to have no border. It's going to have a 20 pixel padding. It's going to have a font family. And the font family, by the way, is a way of specifying a series of fonts to use. To use Bookman Old Style first if it's available on the user's system. Then if that's not available, use Times. And if Times isn't available, use any serif font. And finally, to have a width of 400 pixels. And then we see again another paragraph tag here. I forgot my carriage return. Darn it. We're going to say that all paragraphs are going to have a left margin and a right margin of 4 M's and 2 M's. Now we could get down into the weeds of many, many different possibilities here, what this all means. I'm not going to get into that much depth. Oh, and I see we do have a hand up. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Bookman Old Style, I see how it's in quotations, and I know that is the proper name of the font. Okay.
Yes.
And I know Times serif. I know what Times is, et cetera, et cetera. But so is this in quotations because it's the proper name of the font, or is it because it's the one you prefer most?
No, it's in quotations because it has spaces, I believe. And in order to make sure that that's understood as one unit, we put it in quotes.
Oh, okay.
I believe that's correct.
So kind of like when you're doing a search, you want to make sure these things aren't separated. You do that.
Yeah.
Got it.
Exactly. So to say that that's the full name of the font, we don't need to do that for Times because it's just called Times. But if we said Times New Roman,
right,
it would need to be in quotes.
And then if they don't have Times, you just say any old serif, Georgia, or whatever that you have.
There are a few predefined keywords that you can use. Serif, I think sans serif is the other one, and mono.
What's the difference between mono and sans serif?
Oh, a sans serif font is just a font without serifs, whereas a monospaced font is actually all fonts, all the characters are the same width. So it's like a typewriter.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So actually what I'm using here to show you this code is Courier, which is one of the most famous or popular or whatever monotype fonts.
Mono. Okay.
Monospaced fonts, I guess is the correct word.
Thank you. I didn't know that. I knew serif and sans serif, but I didn't know the mono.
So you see that we used in this example some things like margins and padding and borders and width. And there's other things as well, but just one important model to keep in mind is what's called the box model. And most HTML block elements conform to this box model. They'll have your content. Remember how we talked about like a paragraph has this content, which is just some text, or a heading has this content, which is just really important, just some text. That's the content. You can set the width of that content, but you notice you can think of that content as a box, and then it can have padding around it. And then there can be a border that would go outside of that padding. And then there would be a margin which would exist beyond the border. And these are all nested within one another. Content, padding, border, margin. So let's have a little fun, and I use that term advisedly. Let us look at, you'll remember the coffee webpage, that silly webpage about coffee that I made. I will show you now let's see, instead of doing it this way, I'm going to, let's see, do it this way, I guess. Okay, this is my sample web page about coffee. You can see it? Great. Okay, so, and this is a very plain, generic web page. I can scroll down and see it all. That has many of the block elements of HTML. It's just kind of a demonstration, but it has no style. I mean, literally, it has no style elements applied to it, no style rules. So I'm going to show you the same exact web page, but with style rules applied. The HTML is exactly identical to what it was before, but it has style rules applied to it now to say that the background should be blue and a different character and so forth. Different look. Here's another version. This is with more style applied. Quite a bit more, makes it look really funky, right? We've got red borders and even some kind of image in the background, a tiling image in the background. And and the stuff is on different places on the page. It's aligned differently. It's not all left justified. I also wanted to have us look at the CSS Zen Garden. This is a web page, as it says here. It's a demonstration of what can be accomplished through CSS-based design. You can select any style sheet from the list to load it into this page. And it tells us a little bit about the road to enlightenment, littering a dark and dreary road, like blah, blah, blah. We can scroll down and see that there's text. And it's really nicely laid out. We don't have to read it all now. The point is that this same text, this same HTML, exactly the same HTML, is going to be displayed on this site in many different variations by changing the style, much more artfully than what I did on my coffee demonstration. So let me click mid-century modern. Same HTML, looks so different, right? The road to enlightenment, littering a dark and dreary road, lay the past relics of browser-specific text, blah, blah, blah. It's the same document, only the style has been changed. Really pretty incredible. What if we try garments instead? Same document. All right, I think you're getting the idea of the power. Now, of course, it takes a lot of talent to design something so beautiful. We'll take a look at one last one. This is steel. All right. Feel free to play around with this as you like. I'll paste the link into the chat in case anybody wants to see it themselves. And let me now say what are we going to do next? If I, whoop, that's my email. I don't want to show you that. Ah, yes, W3 Schools. See, I knew there was something I was looking for. W3 Schools. And this is a nice way to learn. We used this before on HTML. I'll put this link in the chat as well. But this is the CSS tutorial. And you remember, if I can go into dark mode. I'm already in dark mode. If you're in light mode, your coding window looks like this. But it's much more fun to be in dark mode. And you can click try it yourself, and it's going to open up a little code editor. And on the left-hand side, we see an HTML document with style, an embedded style sheet, right? And on the right-hand side, we see what that generates over there. So the background color, the body has a background color set to light blue. Now you might wonder what colors are available. Well, there's a long list of colors that are available by word, word color. So I know, for example, most of the obvious ones will work, like orange, for example. So I can change the background color to orange just by editing that line. Now, what I'd like to invite you to do is to play around with this for, say, 5 minutes. It's 4:59. Click that link in the chat. I'm going to stop the share. Click that link in the chat. Go play around for 5 minutes, and at 5:04 we'll reconvene. How does that sound? Hey, it's 5:04. Shall we reconvene? Any thoughts or questions about that little exercise? All right, I'm not hearing anything, so I'm just going to move along. I thought that it would be a good time to see see what we can do in Brightspace. Using this platform, since a lot of us will, of course, the general principles of HTML style and HTML and CSS can be implemented in many places in modern life, right? So you may find that you use this knowledge elsewhere, but Brightspace is the platform that we all are using a lot these days. So let's take a look. Now, Catherine, did you take the HTML templates class?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay. I think it's being offered again. So okay, you might want to take a look at that. The HTML templates class will show you how to throw on some pre-made, basically some pre-made style sheets and other stuff like that. Some HTML, some fancy HTML with style that will allow you to make your HTML content in Brightspace look better, especially more responsive on different devices and so forth, in a prefab kind of way. And here's an example of that, just to give you an idea. This is this kind of showcases some of the elements that you can have using the template, using one of the templates that Brightspace provides. And what I wanted to show you is if we edit the HTML for this and go kind of look under the hood, remember we can always do that, and then going down to actually use the HTML source editor, we can see what's going on. And we can see that indeed there is some language here that we know means it's a link element in the head of the document, and it's linking to something with those magic letters at the end, CSS. And we're getting a lot of wavy red lines underneath because my spell checker doesn't like a lot of these words, but pay no attention to the wavy red lines. In other words, this is a link to an external style sheet. And that's what makes all that magic that we were just seeing happen. And that's how these HTML templates work. And we all can also see, here's another tag. It's actually linking to 2 external style sheets. Can you believe it? 2 style sheets. And if you're wondering what does that style sheet itself look like, we can actually take a look at it too. Here it is. This is the second style sheet. I didn't want to show you the first one because it would really scare you. This one is impressive enough. I mean, it looks nicely formatted, right? Like I told you, the carriage returns that make it look nice, easy to read for a human. That's great. But look how it goes on and on and on and on. So as you can see, this is not something that most faculty are going to do. It's something that professional web designers might do, and they probably use authoring tools to generate it. That's the power, though, of having a style sheet, an external style sheet linked to your documents. It can have a lot of style information in there, and then you can reap the benefits of that in your web pages. Now, we're not going to go over how you throw those pre-made templates into your course today. I just wanted to give you a heads up that is a future offering. What I'm going to do is a little simpler in order to aim at the actual learning of working with styles. And so we're going to go back to my famous coffee page. So here I've taken that plain old coffee page that we talked about before, that we looked at before. The HTML block elements are all here. They have no style in them whatsoever. And we can look under the hood, right? We can edit, well, first we have to edit it, edit the HTML. And then we have to go into the HTML source editor. And now we see all the nicely formatted HTML that I've put in there, but there's no style information. So one way we could do it is, I'm not going to get into linking to an external style sheet today. That's one way to do it, but we can embed a style sheet. So I could type some stuff up by hand, but to save time, I can tell you that I've got some text ready to go here. And I'm just going to go right here and paste it into place. I just need to make sure I'm pasting it into the right place. So I'm going to make a new line right here. Notice where I'm putting it. I'm putting it in the head of the document. The head is defined by the opening head tag and the closing head tag. And there's certain metadata that should go in between the head. For example, the title of a page should always go in the head. And there's other things as well. Links to external style sheets can go there. Links to external scripts, if you're working with JavaScript, would go there. And other things of that nature. In this case, we're going to embed a whole bunch of style rules. So I'm just going to paste right here. Boom. There it is. Now I'll scroll back up and we can look at what I just pasted in there. It's the style element. It opens and closes with the style element, and then in between we have those style rules. The first rule is going to apply to 3 different elements of HTML, the body and TD and TH, which are table elements. You can separate those with commas and just have a whole bunch of elements that are selected at the same time for the same rule. Then we see a number of very simple style rules that, as you can probably just read, even without knowing CSS, we can probably discern that this is going to make the background of the page green. It's going to make the color white. That means the color of the font, the texts on the screen. It's going to specify to use a sans serif font, Arial if it's available. It's going to set a font size. It's going to justify the text. And then we have some rules applying to the size and color of the 2nd and 3rd level and 4th level headings, and then some, remember our A tag, our A tag is the anchor tag, which is links, basically. We're going to say that links should be styled a little differently as well. And then we're even going to make a rule for our HR. That's the horizontal rule that we have at the bottom of this page. There's a horizontal line that goes across the bottom. We're going to say it's going to be blue and it's going to have a height of 1 point. So it all ends with the closing style element. That's what I pasted in, that whole bunch of text. So now I can click save. Well, we're not really seeing any difference here. That's true. You don't, a lot of times don't see the difference until you actually save the document. So it's almost like you're working blind. But once I do save it, you see the result. The background is green now. The text has different colors in different places. Obviously, you could get in trouble here if you set the color of text and the color of the background in such a way that it's hard to read. That would be a usability no-no. And we even have the blue horizontal as mentioned. So that gives you an idea. Now, of course, I could come back in and edit my HTML and edit the source and change things around a little bit. I could make it a serif font, right? I could say that I really like Cochin. That's my favorite font. Then I could say that the background is going to be gray instead. But I could make the height instead of that horizontal rule could be 10 points, and the color of it, oh, that's not a 10, that's is 1, 0. It could be 10 points, and I could make the color of it yellow or something egregious like that, and we can click save, and I don't really see the results until I click save and close. Hopefully something will change here. Yes, it's got a gray background, and we see also the horizontal rule now actually has, it's kind of tall, and it's this light green color, or whatever that is. Yellow, it's yellow, that's what it is. Okay, so that's one example of what you can do with style sheets. I also wanted to look at this image, some things you could do with images, because Janice pointed out that this is one of the things that it seems a little bit difficult to do with just the tools that Brightspace gives you. Now, the HTML editor that Brightspace provides is really quite good. It can do most of the things most of the time that most faculty need to do. But occasionally there are some things that it doesn't seem to have the capability to do yet. They'll probably add it in the next iteration. But for right now, let's notice that this is a page, an HTML document with a couple embedded images, and then there's a paragraph of text, and the text is kind of running right up to the image. So this is something where we might want to set the padding, right? Or margins or something of that nature. So if I edit the HTML, I can get into it. And one thing I can do if I go to my HTML source is now, because I've taken these classes, I'm not intimidated to look under the hood and see what these tags are and what they do and so forth. And I can see the image is inside of the paragraph. It's an inline image, right? That's the image tag right there. It's all that stuff. The important part is we can find it because it starts with the IMG, right? That's the HTML for an image element. And it has the source attribute, which says, what image are we talking about anyway? What's the source? I'm going to just manually type in here a new attribute, style. The style attribute is available for, I think, virtually every HTML element. And of course, we always set our attributes equal to something, style equals, and then we're going to encase that value, the value that it's equal to, in quotation marks. Style equals quote something unquote. And as a rule, you want those, you don't want to use, fancy curly quotation marks. You want to just straight up and down quotation marks, just to be set on the safe side. Okay, so what are we going to type here? Well, we would type a style rule. This is where your style information could go. Remember, this is the simplest and easiest way to put style information in. We don't even need to put a selector or curly brackets because we're putting it right in the HTML element itself. If we were doing this up in an embedded style sheet or an external style sheet, we would need to say, this is going to apply to image tags, maybe to all image tags or to a particular class of image tags. But since we're doing it right in the tag, we're going to just specify it right here. We don't need to put any of that. We can just type the style rule, and we can say something like padding, colon, 15 pixels. And to be on the safe side, we'll put a semicolon there. Don't really need it because there's only the one rule. And now I can click save. Oops. And look, it's already put the padding on there. Sometimes it seems to want to show that. Yes.
Was that? Did that skip? Did it push it down further? It looks like it.
It does look that way. Let's save the whole thing and take a look.
That might not be what you wanted to do,
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that it was like that before.
Now it seems to have no padding at all.
Okay. I thought with padding, what you wanted was a space, between the image of the coffee cup.
Yes.
And then
I did. I wanted padding all around the image. What I thought was going to happen is that and it worked in my demo earlier when I was preparing this earlier. What I thought was going to happen,
what'd you do?
Has overwritten my style information. It's gone. It doesn't say padding anymore. So I'm going to, it did put a float element in there, which is maybe is what I wanted, maybe it's not. I'm going to type manually in here now what I typed before. Style, padding, 15 pixels.
So is that going to be 15 pixels all around?
Yes, unless you say otherwise, it's applying the padding to the whole thing.
But that doesn't seem to me what you want.
Right, we've got some issues.
I'm looking at all the space at the top.
Yes, no, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is you're absolutely correct. Now, one thing that I have found is that you don't even need to go into the edit HTML source as I've been doing.
Right.
Brightspace does have a way to address the style directly. Now, you'll notice that there is a padding, a 15 pixel padding around the image. My other image, which doesn't have that style rule applied, when I select it, it just selects to the border.
Okay.
When I select this one, it can see there's, remember the box container model that we talked about? It can see that I've added that style rule, and it's honoring.
It's honoring it.
It's honoring it, but it's also doing some other stuff that I don't necessarily want.
Yeah.
So if I look here under this menu, this pop-out menu, I can go into this insert attributes thing. I don't even have to go to the HTML source editor. This lets me do it in a way that a lot of people are going to be more comfy with, which is not looking at the code directly. You're still going to see some code, but it's kind of handling some things for you. In particular, it's saying like, here's where the style goes. So I don't have to type the style attribute and the equals and the quotes and stuff. I can just say what goes in the style rule here directly. And I could put other, let's say that I only want the padding to be on the right-hand side of the image. I don't want it to be all the way around. You would do that by changing this to be padding right. Again, this is syntax that you can only learn with time.
Yeah, of course.
Vocabulary that you can only learn with time. But and then you click create, and it's going to now have the padding only on the right.
Okay.
You'll have this issue with the way that it's in the line of the text. Yep. And if I look under the at the HTML source, which is just another way of doing some of this same stuff. I can't really see exactly why that's happening, except
I generally
yes.
have problems with this. And so what I normally do when I'm trying to work with an image is I'll insert it on if I wanted the image to float around the text, like I have the image, but then instead of the text showing up down at the bottom, I want it to float. I'll use the alignment button in the toolbar.
Do they
So
have?
I'll select the image, and then let's say I want it to be aligned left.
Okay.
I'll choose align left.
Yep. Yeah, there we go.
And see it right.
It's done it.
Yeah.
That has done it. And now if we open up the insert attributes dialog, you'll see that it's added the style for me. Float : left. That is so it is using style. It is actually a lot of times what's happening in the HTML editor here, the what you see is what you get WYSIWYG editor. It's writing HTML and CSS for you. This is a way of doing this insert attributes is a way of getting a little bit more fine-tuned. And if you know your style rules, you can put them in this way without having to get into all the HTML tag soup that we were seeing there. So this is going to be a way that I think a lot of people will prefer. I also wanted to show that if I can do a little bit more here, I can say padding right 15 pixels, right? I could also say padding left 15 pixels or something like that. I could also say margin right 15 pixels and create that. And now it's going to add more. The margin is outside of the container box. Okay. So now you have 15 pixels inside the box, so to speak, and outside the box. Well, to the user, there's no discernible difference between that and a 30 pixel padding or 30 pixel margin. So you might say, well, what's the point of that? The point, and now it's not showing me anything. Oh, that's because I don't have the image selected. So I've got to select the image and make sure I'm inserting attributes into the correct place. So we could add one more thing, if we will. Instead of padding right, I'm going to add, in addition to a padding right, I'm going to add margin right, a 15 pixel, sorry, not margin, border, a 15 pixel border. And that doesn't show up because the syntax for borders is a little bit different. Okay. The border on the right is we're going to want to say, how do we do this? I think it's something like that. Yes. Yes, I remember correctly. So now I have, it's kind of ridiculous, but I have a margin. So on the furthest outside stretch here is the margin of 15 pixels, a border of 15 pixels, which is so thick it just looks like a black bar, and padding of 15 pixels. It's kind of crazy looking. And I could just continue to play with this all day, obviously. I could say, instead of the border being just to the right, I could make the border all the way around the image, and then it would look like that, with my funky padding and margin only on the right-hand side. All right, any questions?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Plenty of questions, good.
Am I the only student? I only see myself.
It's you and Janice and Todd and me.
Oh, okay.
Todd, Jason.
Also class, there you go. You had said before when you were putting some code in and whatever, you said something about not using the curly quotation marks, just using the straight. Okay, how do you have it? I mean, how can you choose that? Isn't that a matter of whatever font you're in and that's it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I glossed over that kind of quickly.
Yeah.
And
I started looking, but where the hell did I get to choose?
yes. So remember when we were going through this syntax that
Right.
everything has these selectors and so forth.
Right.
This only applies to external or embedded style sheets,
Okay.
right? The third place that style rules can live is inline, where you actually, which is what we were just doing just now, where you're actually adding the style rules directly to an element.
Right.
And when we have something like this, which is like an embedded or external style sheet,
Right.
we have to specify, what applies to the body, what applies to a paragraph, and so forth. But when we add it directly to an element, we don't have to specify any of this. We don't have to specify the P tag and the curly brackets because we're adding directly to the paragraph, if that makes sense. In other words, the style rules here. If I'm going to choose to apply my styles at the inline level, I'm going to apply them directly to an HTML element, the paragraph element. I don't have to have that other stuff because I'm not needing to select it. Does that make sense? In other words, this is a paragraph, right? This is a rule that would apply to a paragraph. If I copy that and come back here to, come back here to my HTML editor and say, let me edit this source. Right? Or actually, no, wait, I can look, here's my paragraph, right? If I select my paragraph, I've now got my paragraph selected. It looks like the image is selected, but that's just because the image is inside of the paragraph.
Okay.
Okay. So now I can insert attributes into that paragraph.
Right.
Into the paragraph element. And I can choose to do style elements. And since I've copied some style elements, I can paste them right in. This will give it a margin on the left and a margin on the right. And I can click create. And now you'll notice it has a little bit of a margin on the left and the right. It's not very dramatic. So maybe I should make it more dramatic by, instead of saying 4M, I could make it 40M and 20M. And now it's it's really changed everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I didn't need the curly braces and the selector for a paragraph because I was putting it directly in the paragraph. I don't have to say I'm applying this to a paragraph because I'm putting it right in the paragraph element itself.
Okay.
And I don't need the curly braces either because those only go in embedded or external style sheets. If I look at the source now under the hood, you'll see that where is that information? It's right here. Here's the style attribute, margin right 20M, margin left 40M. It's all in that attribute. That's an inline style attribute. If I was putting it up here in the head, I would have to have not just the style rules, but I'd have to do the paragraph, right? And the curly bracket and the closing curly bracket. And actually I'd have to encase that all in style elements to say that these are my style rules. I would have to wrap it in the style opening and closing style tag. And that would apply then to every paragraph in the document.
Okay, but let me ask you, and that's where this will be it. Okay, so the way I was understanding it, so like, say if you go down, you see where it says, quote, font family, blah, 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 pixel, quote. Okay, when you were typing the quotation mark, you said something about wanting the straight up and down quotation marks and not the curly ones while you're doing this.
Right.
And my question was like, how do you have any control over that in what you're doing right there? Because you're not talking about what it is you want, the way you want the page to look. You're giving the words, you're giving the controls or the parameters, whatever. And I just couldn't see how there's a choice with the quotation marks there as you're typing that stuff out.
You don't, you know, I probably shouldn't have said that because most people, I don't think, are even going to know how to make curly quotation marks.
Okay.
But
I thought it was just a font thing.
No. They sometimes show up. A lot of times where they show up for most people is like when you're editing a Word document,
Okay.
it might be set to automatically change your quotes into curly quotes to make it look nice as a typographical convention. So if you were typing HTML in like a Word document, just as to have a handy place to, like a scratch pad kind of thing, you know, to like, I just want to get this text in there. It might convert those quotes to curly quotes. And then if you tried to copy and paste them into another place, they'd be curly quotes. And I don't know what that would happen, but that is really kind of far afield. I should not have even said that in the first place.
Okay. Okay. But I understand now.
Good. And you'll notice that as it's a real convenience to be able to come here and use this insert attributes instead, because then I don't have to type style equals quote.
Yeah.
And all this other, I can just put the value of the style in here. And I still need to know style rules and be able to put it in here. I could copy and paste them maybe from someplace else, though. It's not necessarily, I don't necessarily have to write them from scratch. And as a final reminder, I will say that most of the time, you're not going to want to write this stuff yourself. Most of the time, what you're going to be doing is like looking for a fix. You go searching the internet, searching for some internet forums or talking to some colleagues or whatever, and they say, here's what you do. It's this, just put this little snippet into your document. And hopefully the stuff that we talked about today will help you understand how to do that, where to put it, and to be able to navigate that process in the copy and paste. And of course, most of the time, you're not going to be writing code from scratch.
But I could be on my sandbox and play around with that stuff. And then when I get deep,
that's what I'm doing.
Then I can go onto a real Brightspace page and do that.
Yes.
Okay.
And when you get into trouble, just remember we're here to
help you.
Yes. If you get to the point, for example, of like I want to make a style sheet, my own custom style sheet that applies to multiple documents in my course, I can show you how to do that.
Great.
Thank you so much. Be safe, be well, and take care.
Yep. Y'all take care. Thank you.